Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. It's Friday afternoon. I'm Paul John Dykes. You might remember me. I used to contribute some time ago, Jim. And obviously today I'm joined by Jim Orr. I've got to apologise for the improvised set. I am no longer in a public toilet somewhere in Alicante. I am in Glasgow and we're filming today. So I thought I'd bring my wee iPad and we'll do it from the backstage. There may be a wee bit of echo. The sound might not be 100%, but that doesn't matter because I'm here with Jim Orr. And we're going to be talking all things Celtic. I have been buzzing to get back on, Jim, after just 1 week. And there's so much to talk about. But before we do all that, I want to thank everybody for continuing to tune in. I want to thank everyone who contributed in my absence. And in particular, the guys who were hosting, Jim. Colin Watt, an emerging talent from the Acsom stable. The guys did a good job, didn't they?
Colin Watt's an emerging talent. What?
He's an emerging talent. Or a returning talent. Oh, yes.
Returning talent. I think that's better. Yes, a returning talent. You're very close. You're very close to the screen.
Oh,
You're
sorry.
quite aggressive. It's almost like... No, it's an observation.
Square goal. Is it like a
it's an observation. You've got that kind of look about you today. That's all. You've got that look about you. I'm back. I'm back, baby. I'm back. Yes.
Well, a wee bit like this. Jungle Line comes in. By the way, I am doing all this in a different system. It might take me a wee while to get into it. There we go. Here's Johnny.
Exactly. Here's Johnny. That's the vibe. That's the vibe. You put your head through the door. Yeah,
that's it. I've just done that, yes, with the axe and all that stuff. Jim, lots to talk about, and I'll be doing that. I'll be putting in my tuppence worth. Not being as active on the socials because obviously I've taken a wee break in the last week, but the troops were able to carry Acsom through, and now we're back, and there's lots of changes happening at Celtic, but there's also quite a lot of changes happening at Acsom in the coming weeks and months as well, Jim. But before we do all that, I'm in Glasgow because I will be interviewing Tom Grant as part of our ongoing This Is Acsom Friday night fully produced series. And Tom's someone that we interviewed 6 years ago on a Celtic State of Mind. And obviously since then there's been a lot happened. I want to talk to Tom about the here and now. I want to talk to him about stadium redevelopment. Obviously he was the stadium manager after Fergus came in, and what a project that was. So I'm going to get his take on that. You know, back then, Jim, what was the main stand like? Why did we not consider renovating and rebuilding the main stand back then, and what we should do now? Tom Grant, very interesting character because he was part of the old regime, of course, and he was held on afterwards by Fergus himself.
Yeah, the stand as it was called back then, as opposed to the South Stand, hasn't changed that much. I think we've got different seats. That's about it. And obviously that's a big debate. And we're interested what Tom Grant's take on is tonight. And obviously he's an interesting character in the whole kind of takeover, and that he kind of straddled both camps at one point. So he's quite a key figure, and Fergus taking over. So yeah, interesting to see what Tom says in that whole debate about what do we do with that South Stand. Do we spend the big money to do it up, or do we just leave it the way it is? We have to do something with it because it's kind of falling apart a wee bit. You also can't get in it in terms of season tickets because that's 3 or 4 or 5 years in a row now I've kind of applied for a relocation into the South Stand, and there's nothing going. And it's just me on my own, barely no mates. It's not as if there's a big team of mates. And you know from game to game you can see there's the odd ticket available, so there must be tickets there. So it's a plea. Anyone in the ticket office, hello, I'm back again. So you can't get in, and I think it's the ideal place to watch the game because you really get the atmosphere in there of the other three sides.
I like it.
So I always remember after it got done up,
yeah,
because I was up in the Gods. I used to be North 411 up there sometime, and then somebody I knew couldn't make one of the old firm games that was back then, and I got his ticket for the South Stand, and you realise the kind of enormity of the stadium when you sat in the South Stand. It was just like a ball, brilliant atmosphere. So I'd like to be in the South Stand. Hasn't happened yet. Interesting to see what Tom Grant's take on it is, but yeah, it was a very pivotal figure back in the day because he had a lot to lose. Tom Grant, you know, he's kind of. I think at the time he had a couple of young kids and couldn't really afford to lose his job at that time, and it was okay for fans to say, you know, sell up and move out, beat it, sort of thing. But for him, it was kind of real. And he wasn't one of the bad guys. You know, in terms of who the bad guys and the good guys were, he was certainly one of the good guys. And when we did that kind of save ourselves public meeting, he came along to that with Jimmy Farrell. And in fact, the Celtic View of the following week, it was Tom Grant's article on the front page, and we say these are kind of ordinary fans, these are decent fans, they just want what's best for Celtic, which was a real departure from what White and Kelly were saying, because they were kind of saying these guys are nuisances, beat it, whereas Tom Grant. So I think history will record that Tom Grant was a good guy, and he was torn between the old board and change, and eventually made the right decision, and that paved the way for Fergus. So yeah, he's a real pivotal person in the history of Celtic Football Club.
He definitely is, and I think the last time I spoke to him, Jim, I focused very much on his time at the football club. Tonight will be a slightly different angle, because I'm going to be looking at where we are just now and what his take is on what we should do with the redevelopment of the stadium. By the way, we are setting up throughout this live stream, so if you hear any clattering, I'm blaming it on Gordon in the background there, who does a fantastic job with the videography, and he's just came in to set everything up. But yes, I've said all my thank yous, and I mean that absolutely 100%. Next season, we are going to be not just live streaming, Jim, but we're going to be broadcasting live from a studio every single day onto the airwaves. And it's going to look different, but the content's going to be better. Simple as that. Because, you know what, I love catching up with people like yourself. I love catching up with GP on a Thursday. But it's not quite the same if you're not in the same room. The conversation's not the same. It doesn't flow as easily and in the same rhythm as it would if you're in the same room, looking at the white of the person's eyes and having a proper conversation, disagreeing, talking over each other. You can't really do that on a live stream. So this is something I'm looking forward to, and it's going to be within this building somewhere. We're going to have a studio space. We're going to be broadcasting live every single day. It's a natural progression. It's a natural next step as well. So thanks everybody for sticking with us. We're always trying to stay ahead of the curve, and that's what we're going to be attempting to do this season. Staying ahead of the curve, and on that subject, Jungle Line, that's your second comment of the day. Sorry, it is favouritism. I'm just going to admit it. No, it's not. It's just because I'm using the iPad. And you were first off the mark. Are we Champions League ready? No. We're talking about staying ahead of the curve, Jim. And I want to talk about Champions League today and focus the main conversation on where we are in terms of every pre-season. I say, let's look at the squad. Let's look at our starting 11. And let's look at how prepared we are for European football. Before I do that, though, I can see just in the corner of your screen there some kind of bulbous material to your left.
Right, okay,
to our right.
Here we go.
You're looking at the screen. Here we go. We need to stay on the old board, the Fergus McCann train.
Here we go.
Tell us what is going on. What is that? What's
cool.
that in your
So
book?
basically, as my unofficial job as Paul John Dyke's gopher, got a call a couple of weeks ago, which gave me the opportunity to recreate something that happened 30 years ago almost, where Fergus McCann marched up to the West End, knocked on the door and said, "Give me the head of Jim Farry, please, put on a plate." So here's...
We should have filmed this.
Can you see that? Can you see this?
We can. You have the head. It's a giant heat, and it's Jim Farry. You have the head. Fergus demanded it. The SFA were forced to supply him with it, and it is now in the hands of Jim Orr.
Because basically, Paul John Dykes collects everything and anything, and this kind of qualifies as anything. Basically, I think the story behind this, what's the story? Morning Glory, topical. Paul said,
"Very much
Jim
so.
Farry's head. Go and get me Jim Farry's head." And I thought, well, for younger viewers, I mean, they might know who Jim Farry is, so it's maybe worthwhile spending a few minutes on the Jim Farry story. Because, I mean, last time I was on, we're talking about David Murray, who's resurfaced again, and I said the three words, "not paranoid enough," basically. And when it comes to Farry, not paranoid enough times 1,000.
Absolutely.
Because basically what happened was 1996, it was Jim Farry was the chief executive of the SFA, who deliberately withheld the registration of George Cadetti, so he couldn't play for Celtic at a time where we could have won the double. We were pushing it. It was Tommy Burns' flamboyant team at the time. He missed 5 games, I think it was, and one of those games was the Scottish Cup semi-final, which we lost 2-1 to Rangers. So George Cadet went on to score something like 33 goals in 43 games, I think it was, for Celtic. So if he'd have played in that semi-final, well, every chance Georgie boy might have scored a goal. But in actual fact, more importantly, they missed 2 league games at the time, and they were going for, I think it was 8 in a row at that point in time. And in those 4 league games, I think it was, we drew at Ibrox 1 each, and we drew at Fir Park 0-0. So if Georgie Cadeti had played those 2 games and maybe scored a goal or 2, we might have turned those 2 draws into 2 victories. And if we'd done that, that'd have given us an extra 4 points. And because with the beat Rangers, they'd have lost that point that they got. So it'd been a 5-point turnaround if that had happened. And they won the league by 4 points. So would have won the league that season if Jim Farry hadn't done what he did. And Fergus McCann doggedly pursued the guy, rightly so. And nobody knows why he did it. That was the thing. Nobody knows why he did it, because basically, as I said, Tommy Burns, which a lot of fans look back on very fondly, potentially cheated out that league championship because of the chief executive of the Scottish Football Association. 8 in a row might not have happened if it wasn't for the cheating of the chief executive of the SFA. We might have qualified for Tommy Burns' team might have qualified for the Champions League if it wasn't for the cheating of the SFA. Who knows what Tommy Burns' team might have achieved if they went into that Champions League if it wasn't for the cheating of the chief executive of the SFA. And he was sacked a few years later for gross misconduct. And because Fergus just chipped away at it, because that's what Fergus was like. So, not paranoid enough, basically. And, I see that obviously I did caught up in the Acsom group chat. They're talking about David Murray talking about to Jim White. You're thinking, my oh my, soft questions. No questions about dual contracts, side letters. Nope. Again, for the younger viewers, at the time they were signing players, giving them 2 contracts. Because what you're meant to do is you're meant to register every player's contract with the Scottish Football Association. So Celtic sign a player, they send the contract into the SFA, they pay tax on it to the taxman. What Rangers were doing were they were having 2 contracts. Send one to the SFA with, say, half the guy's wages on it, pay tax on that. And the other one, over there at the road, and gave the players side letters.
Yeah.
Gave the players side letters, said, it's okay, don't you worry about that. We'll sort your tax out, you don't have to bother. So these are the side letters, these are the dual contracts. He wasn't getting asked those questions. Because the other ones you can bat away easily, like HMRC, what are they like? What are they like? Because we had a big stadium and we could have sold players. And Craig White, how could I know? I Googled the guy and it said he was all right. So, But Jim White, ask him about side letters, ask him about dual contracts. He didn't do it. Yeah. And also the fact that the guy who was the secretary, I think it was at the time, at Ibrox, who was at the start of this, he becomes the president or the vice president of the SFA 3 years later when all this stuff's going on. Not paranoid enough.
Was he also
rant over? That's an early rant. Was that 12:44?
No.
They all get EBTs.
EBTs as well. The thing with interviews that I appreciate to a degree, Jim, having worked prior to my face appearing for the first time, albeit a little bit smaller normally on this particular platform, my full-time job involved interviewing people on a daily basis for about 12 years. And I couldn't even count how many people I've interviewed. So there's a structure to interviewing. There's a whole process where you have an interview plan. And I took that into writing my books and making my documentary. And then, of course, obviously the live events and speaking to people on Acsom as a podcast. And I understand how the interview process works insofar as there are certain people who will agree to an interview under certain conditions. And it's pretty clear to me, Jim, that the only reason that David Murray has spoken to the people that he's spoken to is because they've agreed to the conditions set by him. And one of those conditions will undoubtedly be not to mention the side letters because nobody's mentioned them. And somebody like Jim White, like him or loathe him, he's experienced enough, Jim, to know that is your time bomb. That's your smoking, ticking bomb. Got to ask the hard question, the difficult question.
Also, why that's important, again, just for younger viewers, was the fact that because you're meant to register all your contracts for a player to be registered properly, if you don't have that documentation, you're unregistered to play. So if you play that player in a game without having seen all his contracts, then it's a 3-0 defeat. That's the rules.
Every game.
3-0 defeat. Every game. And it wasn't just like, and there's been instances in the past, recent past, with Dumbarton or somebody haven't registered a player properly and been kicked out of the cup, or they've lost points.
Park.
And that was a one-off in one game. This was virtually every single player in virtually every single game over a 10-year period. Mm-hmm. And what I said last time I was on was that, and these trophies that were won by cheating haven't been reassigned yet. I don't blame Rangers. I don't blame the SFA. I blame Celtic. Because if Fergus McCann was here, we wouldn't be having this conversation. It'd have been sorted out. Because what you're not looking for is you're not some sort of tinfoil hat Celtic paranoid person. You're saying, well, that was the rules. Mm-hmm. Just apply the rules. Just apply the rules. That's all. Yeah.
Jim, you're spot on. And again, it's something we can discuss actually today for tonight's show with Tom Grant as well. Because to understand the inner workings of Fergus McCann, I guess you need to have spent some time with him, which Tom did. And we can ask him his take on, I think Fergus would be like a dog with a bone with that. Chasing after that, chasing down that, what he would have seen as a legitimate argument, which he did when he thought Celtic should have been paid money for John Collins. And he kept that going.
And he was right. And he was right for that as well. Totally right.
It continued. I think John Collins, by the time the decision was made and there was nowhere else to take that fight, Collins was at Everton. He had already left Monaco. Love Fergus McCann, and I'm going to be very interested to hear from Tom. There's loads of other things I want to ask him as well, actually. I've said many times on here, you mentioned Oasis earlier on. Actually, you didn't. You mentioned the name of one of their famous albums. And they are very topical. We didn't jump on the bandwagon. We nicked their logo ages ago. But the first gig I ever went to was U2 at Celtic Park. Obviously, Tom will know the inner workings of that as well. I'm going to ask him a wee bit about that. I'm going to ask him about people like Terry Cassidy, for example. And also, I remember back in the day, in Glasgow, you have the Barras, obviously. But in Falkirk, you used to have Falkirk Market. And I don't even know if it had a particular name. It was right behind Coasters. Coasters used to be the sponsor of the Falkirk football team, of course. And I remember going there. I used to pick up loads. You say I love picking things up and keeping them. Yes, I do. And I used to do that a lot at Falkirk Market, be that football jerseys, old VHS Celtic tapes, and even a Celtic gnome. They were all picked up from Falkirk Market, Jim, back in the day. I'll come back to Jim Farry's head on a stick in just a second. But I picked up a Wolf Tones tape one time, this VHS video of a live concert. And I think it was in London. I forget the venue. Someone who's tuning into this today was probably at the gig, but it was filmed, and it was the 25th anniversary, I believe, of the Tones, and it was a great gig. But then after it, there was a few videos. So I think there was like a video of them in Ireland singing one of the kind of love songs, and then there was this video, and it just popped up. I couldn't believe my eyes, and it was the Celtic Symphony, and they had actually filmed it at Celtic Park in the stadium. And you had members of the Wolf Tones with the Celtic centenary jersey. Have you seen this footage, Jim?
No.
No, you haven't. And I can tell that you're really interested in this.
I know, I am, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I've seen a picture of Tom Grant kind of backstage, if you like, in Celtic Park with the Wolf Tones and Billy McNeil. There's a picture. It exists. This did happen, not a figment of my imagination. I'm going to be asking Tom all about that. How did that happen? How did we get away with that? Interesting times, different times. But Jim Farry, why do I want Jim Farry's head? Not only did he mess up the registration of George Cadet, but as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have a new studio setting. And in that studio, there's going to be various different Celtic historical material and curio. And Jim Farry's head's going to feature in that. I think that is important to remind everybody that we were not paranoid enough. Jim, how's the summer going for you in terms of Celtic? I know you don't get too excited by friendly games, you don't get too excited by the launch of new jerseys, and you don't get too excited about speculation on new players.
Yes, why I'm on this podcast. Good point. Yeah, I said last time that I don't want to be the old negative guy. It's only the start of July, and I think you have to wait to get to the end of August to see where we are then, and then we can kind of comment on where we are. If by the end of August we've made a few quality signings, if by the end of August we're qualified for the Champions League, if by the end of August we're no worse than joint top of the league after beating Pittodrie and Ibrox, then I think that's quite a good platform to start the season. At this point in time, like I said in the group chat, I'm cautiously pessimistic, I would say, in that I think if we to play a game tomorrow, if we play a Champions League game tomorrow, qualifier, if we go to Ibrox tomorrow, I wouldn't be that confident. But that's where we are in the here and now. Things hopefully will change over the next few weeks or so. I don't get bothered with friendlies because it's a glorified kickabout. So, and there's nothing at stake. And obviously, I'm on the socials, so I can see the comments after the game and the team. I mean, go to Cork. You know, I mean, I understand it was quite expensive to buy tickets to watch a second stream Celtic side with 3 or 4 regulars in it. I think again that's a bit of a kind of con to the people there. I believe the Como tickets are very, very expensive for this thing tomorrow. So I'm not going to the Newcastle game next week. It's not in the season ticket. I think that's a bit of a kind of scandal that they couldn't put that game in the season ticket. They just need to keep taking. They don't give very much. And obviously, like everyone else, I'm getting an email every 2 days with a new piece of merchandise that you would, well, I wouldn't touch them, but obviously it's to try and, it's just take. In terms of the friendlies, yeah, I've been keeping an eye on how things are going in the socials. I find it quite bizarre that, you know, the manager's saying what the young left back from Japan, he's going to get on loan, and after 45 minutes against the second bottom team in the Irish League, oh no, I think we'll keep him. I think to me that's a bit worrying. I think the whole manager situation is a bit worrying. I think I'd assume, knowing not like yourself, who I'm not in the know with this kind of stuff, but I'd have thought if he was going to stay beyond 3 years, that'd have been announced before now, and we'd have got a big boost from that. So my guess is that he's going at the end of the season, and I think that will cast a bit of a shadow over the season. Whether things are going well or not, I think the fact that I think he's going, and I'm assuming that if they know he's going, then they've already started trying to get the new guy in. But yeah, the friendly thing, it's hard to get excited about friendlies.
Well, as a viewer from afar of not only Acsom but of the friendlies, I was engrossed in them, I've got to admit, because I am that sad guy on holiday who takes their iPad to make sure that they can tune into Acsom and watch the Celtic.
Well, you're not collecting heads, obviously. So,
when I'm not collecting heads of shamed SFA officials. I'm going to be speaking about that as well, actually. There's a few interesting bits after the takeover that I don't think I've ever spoken to Tom about. Things like the temporary stand. I read a story fairly recently that JP Taylor mentioned how Fergus was able to make money off that temporary stand.
Yes.
Celtic weren't using it. And just things like that just I find quite intriguing in actual fact, but also the flying of the flag. We've spoken about the famous Robert Kelly versus SFA and the flying of the Irish tricolour. Happened again in the 1970s actually with Tom Devlin, maybe the beginning of the 80s, and then it happened again when Fergus was playing. Fergus got the contract to play home games at Hampden Park. They were not allowed to fly the flag of a foreign country. That was in the contract. I need to speak to Tom about that as well to try and stop us from flying a tricolour. But I want to focus
see off a massive tangent, says he buzzing in. Buzz.
Tangents
off a massive tangent. Since you collect stuff, it's occurred to me there. See if I had to say Vojvodina, second leg, what would you say?
One of the most important corner kicks ever.
Memorabilia. All John Dyke's collecting stuff.
Vojvodina. I'm instantly thinking of jerseys.
You don't know,
Jim, but it's probably something a wee bit more obscure.
Curry in for this story. Right. So basically, how this comes from is basically I I didn't comment on the John Clark passing the other week, and the story how I get to Vojvodina is basically that I think I'd said, I mean, Alan Morrison does just a ton of stuff. It's unbelievable the amount of things that Alan is doing virtually every day, analysing this, analysing that, podcasts. He's got a brilliant podcast yesterday. He's talking to some American analytic guy. That's a wee bit of a tangent as well. You get a chance to watch that. It's fascinating guy about how we consume sport on TV and stuff. Anyway, notwithstanding that, what's my point, Jim? My point is that John Clark, so the Alan Morrison tie-in is just after Christmas there. Alan and his James did a deep dive on Lisbon.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned it in passing here.
And you said if you watch one bit of football content this year, make sure it's that show. That's
yes.
how much you enjoyed it.
It's brilliant, absolutely brilliantly fascinating, brilliant stuff. So like Billy Connolly, brilliant. Anyway, so
you've been kicking about with Des for far too long.
I go messages for Des as well as Paul John Dykes. That's what I do. So, anyways, the point, Jim, is that there was a case to be made for John Clark being man of the match, right? And you think somebody making that statement, you think don't be daft. But then we look at the stats in the game, because of the way Inter Milan played, everything's on the deck. So Billy McNeill had 19 touches because they didn't have a corner, so there's nothing to clear. So everything's on the deck, and it's John Clark intercepting things.
Yeah.
And Billy McNeill had 19 touches of the ball in Lisbon. I mean, Liam Scales has regularly 90 touches. So anyway, John Clark has something like twice as many touches as Billy McNeill had in the game. And I was reading a book called, what was it called? A Year and a Day.
Numbers Game.
You read that?
Right. No.
A Year and a Day about Lisbon. Best book in Lisbon, I think I've read so far. Graham McCall. And reading it, and he's just...
Yes, I do have that. I've never read it. I thought you were talking about One Afternoon in Lisbon, another cracking book.
No, there's hundreds of books of Lisbon. Anyway, so let's keep to the point, Jim, keep to the point. So basically, reading this book, and then with Alan's analysis in mind, I thought, I'll watch the game. It's been a long time since I watched the game before. And John Clark was immense, because you're watching it with that knowledge now. You think, I'm actually watching for... And he was talking about, in his book, he was talking about something like Bertie took the ball into the corner 3 times in the last minute. So if you say that, you don't think, I don't remember that. If you watch the game at some point. So and then Bertie does that. He takes the ball in the corner 3 times. So John Clark's, equally really good case for man of the match in the most important game in Celtic's history, which put Celtic on the map. So you then think that elevates John Clark, and the next day he died. So it's quite poignant in terms of how that happened. And the point of Vojvodina is that in the Graham McCall book, what he does is he interviews a player from each of the opposition teams, right? And the Vojvodina guy, and the Dukla Prague guys were saying we should have beat them, Vojvodina guys said we should have beat them, whatever. And what this guy said, forget the guy's name, but what he said was that they were stunned by McNeil's goal in the last minute, and there was nothing they could do. And when the guy kicked off, they passed the ball to this guy, and the ref blew his whistle, and the guy kept the ball. And this is 2017, this book. And he said, it's looking a bit weary. So at 2017, this guy's got the Vojvodina ball. So I thought I would pass on to Paul John Dykes, who no doubt is like thinking, how do I...
Yes. I certainly couldn't afford it, Jim, but
it's better than Jim Farry's head. That's all I'm saying. It's better than Jim Farry's head.
It's an incredible relic. I love all that. And some of the Lisbon tales that I've probably found out in more recent times, I find really dead interesting, because you grow up watching the game, seeing the same footage time and time again, reading all the interviews, reading the books. But obviously I love the Nearly Mocking Adidas football boot story. I love that story. The fact that Ronnie Simpson had all the guys' falsers and he's bun it in the goal mouth, I think that's brilliant. Just little things like John Fallon getting sent up with Jock Stein to make sure that they took a certain bench, because there was no dugouts, but take that bench. All these things. The fact that Celtic were almost late. In fact, they were late. They were late to turn up to the game, which meant that there was no time to get nervous before it. Just get your kit on and out you go. When I was doing all the research for the jersey book, and I'm going to mention the jerseys in a wee moment. The jersey book, Umbro supplied Celtic with 2 unique jerseys for the final. The first one, of course, being the fact that our jersey had short sleeves because we weren't playing in the cold Scottish winter. We were indeed playing in the sunshine. Therefore, it was all short sleeve jerseys rather than the long sleeve numbers that they all used to wear. If you didn't like long sleeve, you would roll them up, Jim, back in those days. So Umbro gave us a set of short sleeve jerseys, but they also gave us a set of V-neck jerseys. And it was because they thought maybe with, the V-neck, the lower neck, it might have been more comfortable in the heat. Jock's team tried them in the training game before, the day before the game, on the 24th of May 1967, and decided we're just going to stick with a round collar. So all these wee moments that could have been different.
Is that when they wore the green shorts with the V-neck? Is that the day before? Like,
you've seen that?
Was that part of the deal? Was that part of the thing, that wear the V-neck and the green shorts?
It would have been white shorts for the game. The green ones were training shorts, which Nearly Morgan Jr. probably still has half a dozen sets of them. So there was all these wee bits that you're thinking to yourself, wow, the whole story around Lisbon. There's a brilliant story about Ian Auld, who's Bertie's brother, who comes over for the game and ends up in Bertie's room after the victory. Yeah. And he's hiding in the cupboard when Jock's team chaps on the door because they're all having a wee fly drink and all this stuff. Yeah. Might actually, all this stuff I love. But one of the greatest stories, you mentioned Bertie, and it just came to my mind here, is at that time, do you remember the name of the Celtic doctor, Jim? Who the Celtic doctor was? Fitzsimmons. So it was Dr. John Fitzsimmons, wasn't it?
Mrs. Fitzsimmons, yeah.
Yeah, like 20 years later, he was pretty unwell for a spell, and his son came into Celtic and took on the role temporarily of the club doctor. His name was Ted Fitzsimmons, and I spoke to him. I don't know if the interview ever made it anywhere, but I remember interviewing him, and he told me the story about his dad used to be a goalie. His dad was a goalkeeper, and he was on the books at Celtic, Jim. I don't know if you know this. So the doctor, who was Celtic's doctor in Lisbon, had previously been on the books at Celtic, and he was a goalie. And it was always his dream, obviously, to appear on the pitch and all this kind of stuff. And near the end of the game, you've told me there, obviously Graham McCall has observed that Bertie took the ball into the corner flag, just to maybe spend a few moments out there, waste a wee bit of time. Bertie also went down injured near the end of the game.
Yeah.
And Nearly Mockham was probably there, but Dr. Fitzsimmons went over to tend to Bertie. And he was like, what's wrong with you? And he says, come closer. He motioned for him to come closer. And when he went down to speak to Bertie, Bertie goes, there's nothing wrong with me. You've now lived your dream. You've been on the park for Celtic in the European Cup final. And it's all these wee things that you pick up, Jim, and you just think it's incredible. Because we all know about the 90 minutes, but there's all this other backstory. And I think the only Lisbon story that's not been told, and it might be in the future told, I'm not sure, we're probably running out of time, is the wives' tales, the lionesses, all the old Lisbon Lions' wives, because they'll tell you a different take on their men, on the preparation, on the camaraderie, on the pressures and the stresses of being often left at home, and these guys are travelling all over the world to play football, Jim. And I think that was something I'd love to hear, because I know Agnes Johnson is a force of nature. She's unique in that respect, and I'm pretty sure there'll be characters in amongst some of the other wives as well. I've had the pleasure of meeting a few of them.
Bobby Murdoch's wife, I met Bobby Murdoch's wife.
Jim Craig's, Willie Wallace's wife, etc. So absolutely, we can digress, and I've got to thank 1100 Strong for tuning in. Today I am back, and I'll be back again tomorrow for the game. I'll be covering the game tomorrow, and we will be also planning the studio development in the next couple of weeks as well. So we're going to keep you updated on that. So I'm just going to pass my phone actually to Gordon, who's over here. Sorry, we're doing all this a wee bit improv today. Couldn't get anybody to cover the stream. So apologies for that, but it just shows you it's a wee bit DIY today, Jim. I want to go back to a comment you made on the left back, Inamura. Like anybody who watched the game, I was impressed with his first 45 minutes. I was really impressed, and I said this during the game in the WhatsApp. Every time he gets the ball, he's playing it forward, which is something that was a bit of an annoyance for me when it came to Greg Taylor. He had this tendency to play the ball back. I thought Inamura only did that when he had to, but he was very much an offensive style player on the front foot. He's a 250 grand signing. who was paraded by the club as, this new player coming in, which makes you think he's a first-team player. But then there was comments by Brendan before the game, Jim, where he's saying, we'll have a look at him and we'll see what happens, and he might go out on loan. And it gives you the sense that he's not a first-team player. Not quite to the levels of Sved in writing off the player, but definitely putting a wee bit of doubt in my mind as to how much did Brendan Rodgers play in the purchase of this man. But after the game,
why say that then? Why say that before the game?
You know what?
I think Brendan's a clever man. He's not going to say things that you think that may come back to bite me. So I just found the fact that 45 minutes against the second bottom team in the Irish League, that changes your mind. Mm-hmm. Different if maybe he was chucked on the Ibrox and performed great. You think, okay, that guy's got the mentality to handle 50,000 Rangers fans, and he was composing the ball and blah blah blah. But meaningless friendly against a poor quality opposition. I just find that it was an astonishing turnaround, and I don't know why I said the first one and then taken back with the second one. I'm just, as I said before, I'm just concerned about the whole manager situation. I'd like him to stay, love him to stay, but I just think this is just. I don't have a good feeling about this season. Got to wait to the end of August before saying too much.
The thing for me, Jim, is I'm going to go back to January, and I remember an interview that Brendan Rodgers gave in January, and it was pointed out by one of our commenters actually during the week, and it brought it back to my mind. Now, in his first time at a football club, there was a certain point where Brendan was firing grenades in the press conferences, and he didn't mind doing it, and he was doing it for a reason. He was doing it, I think, to let the fans know, actually, I'm doing this with one hand tied behind my back. I'm getting given wingers. We've got 1 million wingers. No my player. He was putting it out there. He was talking Terminado, etc., etc. He's since confirmed. He'd done it in a certain way, which I don't think was the right way. He's since confirmed that one of the biggest issues and one of the reasons that he left was this kind of issue that he had with recruitment. In terms of he had a standard with a player which was over here, and he was being presented with players who were over here, way down in terms of quality. And the Sved one was infamous. It became infamous. But in January this season, when he was talking about Celtic's quest for various players, he spoke about wanting to replace Kyogo. Didn't happen. And when he was spoken to on the back of that, he said, I'm not going to fall out with myself. I'm not going to get angry or frustrated about it. I'm paraphrasing here. I'm just going to get on with it and enjoy my time at the football club second time round. I think those words are pivotal to what we're seeing here, because if he was going to sign a new contract, it would have been announced by now. I would have expected, unless there's a huge turnaround behind the scenes. And the club are now saying, well, if you're not going to stay here, the players that are coming in are going to be what I would describe as club signings, Jim. So the player is being presented to Brendan Rodgers. Now, we know that Kieran Tierney doesn't fall into that bracket because all the business was done in January. And we know that. We went down to London, Michael Nicholson and Brendan Rodgers went down, and they were hoping to bring Kieran Tierney up the road. Didn't happen. So we had a backup plan, and the backup plan was Jeff Sloop. Kieran Tierney, of course, signed the pre-contract, and he's joined the pre-season training. But everybody else beyond that, I think there's a good argument to say club signing, every single one of them. The only market that Brendan Rodgers knows is the English market. That's the only market he knows. Now, you might say he's aware of Callum Osman through X, Y, or Z contact down south, but I think it's been pointed out that was probably a David Cleat scouting mission, and he knows all the academies down in England, and he's recommended the player, and the players came up to the football club. So I think it's a legitimate concern, Jim.
That's why I said cast a shadow. Yeah, that's why I said cast a shadow, because I think everything will be done with that in mind. And, we're signing players who the next manager might not fancy. Mm-hmm. It's all a bit dysfunctional for me. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking the Sean Maloney thing didn't make sense to me because he's too qualified for that job. And the wee voice at the back of your mind thinking, well, has he been brought in there to kind of get to know the club, get to know the workings of the club? So when Brendan does go, then you can easily slot in there with John Kennedy or whatever. I hope that's not the case, but I find it odd that he's been appointed to that job. He's far too qualified for that. He should be pursuing a manager. Why would you do that? If I'm Sean Maloney, why would I do that job when there must be better opportunities out there? So What's the reason behind that one? Maybe that's a reason. I don't know. As we both said, it's not been announced. He said he stayed for 3 years, which is absolutely fine. But you then have to plan for him going after 3 years. And that plan must already be in place. You know, if the next manager is not employed, should we bring him in January to shadow the manager for the last few months of the? I just that's part of the bad feeling I've got for this season. I think there's a number of things which might just form the perfect storm. As I said, I'll wait till the end of August, see where we are. But cautiously pessimistic at this point because of all that stuff. And the manager situation impacts on everything. It really does impact on everything. And the sooner we get that sorted out, the better.
You know, the thing as well that I had some time to do, Jim, is the reaction to the discussions that we've been having on Acsom. And I'm going to bring in some of the comments in a wee second here. Actually, I realise I've not done enough of that today. But a lot of people will watch a particular show, and it could be me and you, it could be Kev Graham, it could be any of the contributors, and they come away from that show thinking that was awfully negative. You guys are very pessimistic. Now, I don't think there's ever an intention to put a negative spin on what's happening at the football club. I'll look at every single story that's breaking in the world of Celtic. The vast majority of them now has come from a news source that is a fan media kind of level platform. And I look at all the information that's coming in, and I look at it and I think to myself, right, how much of this is legitimate, authenticated? How much is it basically just reading somebody else's source? And I think when you look at all the information, Jim, after that, you're able to look at it and say, right, I'm going to put that in the speculation stroke gossip category, or I'm going to say, actually, I'm going to pay some credence to that because of the source. But when you take it all, like we've just done there, when we're looking at the signings that are coming in, we're looking at the manager's contract situation as it stands, we are actually just deciphering the facts. Now, maybe because we are a wee bit more old school, a wee bit more cautious, and a wee bit less likely just to believe that the board can do no wrong, Jim, because I don't believe that for a second. We are going to be looking at some of the kind of more, what would be deemed negative opinions on this. If Brendan Rodgers isn't signing a contract this summer, then I think it's safe to say the club are not going to give him £26 million to spend on 3 players like we did last summer. I think, you know, that's not being negative, is it? It's just, if you look at the inner workings of the football club, the frugal nature of the boards, the fact that they only spend when a manager's pushing the envelope, if you like, and that's what's happened last summer, that's not going to happen this summer if Brendan Rodgers isn't going to stay. And I think it's fair to say that.
No, I think it's... I've said this before, we spent £26 million on 3 players who weren't guaranteed starters in that cup final. So that can tell its own story. And taking all the emotion aside, and you look at it just as a business, you've given somebody £26 million to spend. Those 3 players should be your 3 first names on the team sheet, and they should have contributed significantly for the season. I mean, then goes in either interest. They all contributed something, but they weren't all guaranteed starters. And if I'm the money man, I'm thinking, take the emotion away from it. I'm not so sure of this. But the reason I don't get involved in commenting and speculation, because until it's happened, then you can comment on it. Because I think the young Swedish guy we've signed, he looks like a good buy, and it looks as if we've got him for good money. The young guy from Fulham, I saw some comments the other night on the socials. Said, I like the look of this guy. He's never played a first team game.
No.
So maybe if we'd have played, what's his name, Rocco Vata or Daniel Cummings in these kind of games, we might have liked to look at him as well. But for me, he's at that level. So they're not good enough to play in the first team. So why are we getting excited about this? It's just a kickabout at the end of the day. But we've signed the lad, which he does well. But for me, he's in that Rocco Vata bracket. He's not the kind of signing I'm looking to make. And what I said last time was that we shouldn't be signing squad players. You may have to sign 1 or 2 here and there. But the big signing should be players that make our current players squad players. You know, we want a centre that puts Carter Vickers' job at risk, makes him a squad player. That's what we need. Yeah. So the young Swedish guy that's come in, he looks like a first team starter, but we've lost Kuhn. So back to the drawing board there. We need to find somebody to take that place as well. And that's why I said that, being cautiously pessimistic, if we to run out to Ibrox tomorrow, or play somebody in the Champions League playoff tomorrow, would I be confident? No. I hope that in the next 6 weeks or so, that changes. That does a 180, and we've got these good players in. We've beaten Rangers at Ibrox and we're in the Champions League. And that's why you don't want to be too negative at this point in time until these things happen. But it's a bit underwhelming at the moment. We've lost Kuhn. I said the other week there that if you compare this season's squad with last season's squad, we lost O'Reilly, we lost Kyogo from then, and the two people come in that are not as good as them. Now we've lost Kuhn. And then you look at Kasper Schmeichel and you wonder whether the injury is that bad. Carter Vickers' injury, Hatate get injured as well. I mean, I don't know where we are with those. And that's why, not trying to be negative. If you're a Celtic fan and we played these games tomorrow, would you be confident? I wouldn't be.
You know what, Jim? I don't think it's negative. I think it's legitimate concerns from a Celtic fan who wants the same as me. And that's for Celtic to be as successful as we possibly can be. And there's always this feeling, I think, under the current regime who run the football club, that they get to a point and then they regress. They don't want to go that wee step further. It's like, yeah, we could talk all day about whether or not the £26 million worth of player was worth what we paid for them. And that's a debate that will rage on all season. But I don't think the answer is, right, let's play it safe again. Let's, don't spend more than £3.5 million on a single player. Let's make sure they're under 23 years of age. And then you're going into that profile category where you're limiting yourself as well. Nygren, for me, absolutely looks like a steal, looks like a snippet, £1.7 million. Brendan Rodgers might say, yeah, I had final say on him. But he said that with the clutchy players that came in his first transfer window, who only now, Jim, we're starting to move out, not even permanently. Lagerbielke's left the building. Nawrocki is away. Some of the other guys.
And that's the thing.
Are still at the football club.
Yeah, sorry for butting in. I just feel that in his first season back, up until about April, we were bang average. And we could have lost the league. That easily lost the league. And then I think there'd have been a lot more focus on, why did you sign Lagerbielke? Why did you sign Nawrocki? And because we won the league, and what I've said a few times in the podcast is that on-field success kind of masks off-field inefficiencies.
Yeah.
And that the old kind of adage, act in haste, repent in leisure. We've been repenting at leisure with people that the manager said, I'm happy with. He said he's happy with. Don't say it if you don't mean it. Right? So you're the manager and it's all on you because you said you're happy with it. And we're having to get rid of these, who I don't think are that bad players. I don't think any of those two guys I mentioned have let us down. I think they're better than Welsh. Welsh is still in the build.
Yeah, he is.
So that's the concern that we have. I don't want to be too negative about it. Just once we get a few quality signs in the door, if we're going to be first team starters right in there, I'll be a bit more confident.
But one thing I do,
again, as you said a minute ago, that if he's leaving, then are the board going to give him the money to buy those types of players?
I think they'll revert to bringing in a lot of bodies, Jim, in the hope that at least one, maybe a couple of them, will make them a big profit. And I do think that's what they'll revert to.
Yeah. Also, just to butt in again, is the fact that not everything when the league is within our control, because our main rivals are going to have that impetus now in terms of new owners in who are going to do something different. Whether it works or not, who knows? I think it's a reasonably good manager, and he's making the right noises. They're buying players. Okay, maybe it's easier to buy players than we are because we're looking for players that maybe other teams want to buy as well, so it's much more difficult. But they're strengthening their squad. They're not going to be as bad as last year. And even them so bad as last year, the last 4 times we played them, we couldn't beat them over 90 minutes. So I think they'll take care of all the other teams, and it's down to those games. And their recent record in them has been really poor. So I think there's lots of cause for concern, but I'll shut up now because I'm getting too negative.
No, not at all. What I was going to say on that point, Jim, nobody wanted to hear it when you were talking like this last season. You were saying, right, okay, nobody's concerned that we're not beating Rangers here. Well, I am, because what if it's tighter next season and we don't beat them and we're in this rut, etc. So absolutely, I get what you're saying. I'm going to bring in some of these comments here. Mo Sislak, here we go, you're in. Jim is correct again. Get back to us at the end of August and stop all the bedwetting. Hopefully, I'm not the bedwetter. Big Red was at the Tones at the Barras for the 25th anniversary, not believing that Jim hasn't seen the Celtic Symphony video. Have you seen it, Jim?
Call me a liar,
Big
that
Red's
guy.
not believing you.
I was saying,
He's not believing you. I'll send you the link. That's what I'll do, Jim. I'll send you the link. Every single summer, whether I write it down or not, I always look at the Celtic squad, and I've always got a list of guys that I think are not going to contribute to the success of the club that season that should be moved on. And I also have another list, as I say, either in my head or written down as a blog or spoken about on this show, where that list of players are the guys that I think are Champions League ready. Now, I need to qualify what I mean when I say that. I don't think they're capable of winning the Champions League, Jim. They're the players in the squad that you think to yourself, right, that's the right fit for this competition. And I went through it last season, I went through it the season before, and I'm going to do it again this time round, because I think it gives you a good gauge of how strong your starting 11 is. It also shows you where you need to strengthen. So when I look at the goalkeeping situation, obviously, there's been a wee bit of movement. Scott Bain's moved on. We've brought in Ross Doohan, a bit like for like movement there. Third choice out, third choice in. I was looking at pictures, actually, of Kasper Schmeichel. You were talking about concerns about his injury there. I'll tell you one thing, he looks really lean. He was being criticised for that last season, Jim. I think in Denmark, he was being criticised for maybe carrying a wee bit of weight. It gets harder as you get older, and I can testify to that. And Gordon's behind the camera also nodding his head. And Kasper Schmeichel looks fit. I think in the goalkeeper situation, I'm going to say that I'm basing this on his performances last season, actually, Jim. I'm happy that Kasper Schmeichel is Champions League ready. People might say he lost 7 goals against Borussia Dortmund. I'm not going to blame the goalie for that. It was a terrible performance across the board. Are you happy that we have a goalkeeper who's Champions League ready for the new season?
I think what's kind of soured things was the cup final. And the fact that he had an injury and not they shouldn't have played in the cup. So that kind of soured what was a brilliant season. I think it was a fantastic signing. He dug us at home in a whole lot of games. But that wee soured bit at the end, I think it's Sinisalo had to play the cup final, chances of winning the treble. So that's, I think, the recency of that kind of sours things a wee bit. He is getting older. Injuries take longer to clear up. So if he's a full fit Kasper Schmeichel, not a problem. Sinisalo looked pretty good as well when he came in. So I don't have concerns about the goalkeepers, no.
I've just noticed behind me there, we've got 2 plants and a fan. That's not a bad thing to have. I always have a couple of plants at the live events and at least 1 fan, I think, anyway, because my wife works at them. When we look at the defence, I'm looking across the defensive area. I was concerned last season I didn't have Greg Taylor in this category, Jim. I didn't think he was a Champions League fit player, if you like. I do think we've got a left back in the building who is now in Kieran Tierney. I've always been happy with, in fact, I'm telling a lie. I wasn't. The first time I spoke about this, Johnston, I didn't think made the mark, but he does now, and he did last pre-season as well. In the central area, Cameron Carter-Vickers is the only central defender that I'm confident is at the level as well. 3 out of 4 is not bad, Jim. Do you agree or disagree? Do you think there's any other defenders that are good enough at this level?
I like the fullbacks, and I think a bit of a concern over Cameron Carter's injury record. I think if he was a bit better, a bit taller, he might have moved on by now. I just like the idea of 2 big 6'3", 6'4" commanding centre halves who dominate in the air, they're good on the ground, and the teams that played at Celtic Park, I've said this before, apologies for repeating myself, were Bodo Glimt and Bruges. I just thought the guys they had at centre half just looked like football players, big, strong, didn't get messed about. Cameron Carter-Vickers is a good defender, doesn't score enough goals for me. So I think you should be signing somebody that makes Cameron Carter-Vickers a squad player. I'll be bringing 2 centre halves to play that kind of football. And if we want to play the kind of football we play, I think we need at least 1 centre half who's confident bringing the ball forward and drawing people out and playing those pack passes as Alan Morrison has educated me. It takes people out of the game,
Yeah. Listen, we've only done the back 5, and I've already got 4 that I think are Champions League quality. People might think that's a wee bit optimistic.
I'll say 3.5. Right, I've got 3.5. Right.
Well, the next bit might be controversial because when we move into the midfield, for the last 3 seasons when I've spoken about this, I've said that Callum McGregor is. I do think he's still the linchpin. He's the guy that orchestrates the tempo of our game. When he's not playing, we miss him. A lot of detractors might say that he's kind of losing it a bit, or he's at an age where he needs replaced, or we need a succession plan. I'm still going to say I'm happy with him in the midfield in the Champions League. And then beside him, Rio Atati gives us a kind of game-changing magic, the magic dust that we didn't have in the Scottish Cup final, Jim. I'm going to say last season I said Rio was a Champions League player. I'm going to stick with that this season. And this is a controversial one because a lot of people will disagree. I'm not saying it just for the traction. I actually think Engels, I'm happy with Engels. If we signed him this season as a Champions League player, I think he's got a Champions League campaign under his belt. People think he's a favourite of mine and all the rest of it, and I can't see through my blinkers and all that. But strangely enough, that would mean that our three midfielders are all good enough for the Champions League, or our standard or our standing in the Champions League. Would you agree with that? I guess many will disagree.
Callum and Rio, fine. Engels has still got a bit to prove for me. Also, you're assuming it's a 4-3-3 again.
Yeah.
Who knows? The manager might change things. The fact that Kieran Tierney's back. I'd read some things about him. He might play Kieran Tierney as a centre back. Hopefully that's not the case, because get centre backs to play centre back, don't play left backs at centre back. So that might change the formation. I think Engels has a bit to do. The fact he'll have a full pre-season behind him, that might make a difference. But maybe we need a different composition, middle of the park. Again, referring to the guru Alan Morrison, he talks about the composition of the midfield maybe not being right. Maybe Engels is a really good player, but not in the style of football that we play. Maybe he's more effective in a different position or whatever. So like the back four, I would say 2.5 again. So I've got 3.5 and 2.5 so far.
Still pretty positive. We're finishing on a positive spin here, Jim.
Indeed.
We've got 3 minutes to go on this stream, and we're being very positive. But then we get to the top line. Jota, for me, is one of these players, but he's injured. Obviously, Maeda, without a doubt, he is in that category, and so was Kuhn, but he's left the building, or he's in the process of leaving the building. Nygren, I can't say. Like everybody else, I've seen the showreels, I've looked at the data, I can't say for sure. I think that when you look at Ida, I thought he had a very good Champions League campaign. He scores his goals against Aston Villa, Bratislava. He forces the goal against Young Boys. But I don't think he's in the same category as Maeda, and I don't think he's in the same category as Jota just yet. Jamesy Forrest, in his pomp, absolutely, but he's 34 now. I think as a backup, absolutely. But up top, I think we've got two players who are Champions League quality. Jim, or feel free to disagree with that.
I think the fact we're still talking about potentially James Forrest playing is an indictment of the whole club. What's the Swedish guy's name again? Nygren. Yeah. If he's playing maybe as a 10, they'll be going like 4-3-2, 4-3-1-2, 4-3, whatever. But that may make a difference to the shape of the team. Maeda's stick on, he gets a tick. The young guy coming in, the Swedish guy, I think we'll have to give him a tick based on what I've seen so far. And Ida, that's another half, I think. So I've got 3.5, 2.5, 2.5.
The big thing for me,
I'm all right with the goalkeeper.
The issue I've got here, Jim, is the fact that that's all fair and well when they're all fit. But we've had, obviously, injuries to the likes of Callum McGregor, Carter Vickers, Kasper Schmeichel, Jota, Rio Tati. And that's why you need that really strong first 16 or 18 players, don't you? If you really want to make a fist of it in Europe. So that's where I am. Please feel free to disagree in the comment section. I was going to get into my going from Jim Orr to Jim Dior, because I made a comment in terms of football tops the other day that went a wee bit viral, because a lot of people agreed and a lot of people disagreed with regards to this warm-up kit. All I'm going to say is I had a wee week away there, a wee break, and I'm sitting there as an older kind of gentleman now, Jim. No, obviously, it's the same vintage as you, but getting there. And I'm looking at all the young team walking about Spain, and they're all like clones. Listen, I'm not criticising them. 20 odd years ago, it'd have been the same for me. 30 years maybe. They're all clones. They're all kind of wearing the same gear, prancing about with the flip flops on and the white socks. But they were either wearing a Hawaiian shirt or a football jersey. That seems to be what they're doing, right? And the wackier, the more colourful, the more risque, the better. So loads and loads of groups of guys walking about these places. Football jerseys are now part of fashion. They're not just something that you wear tribally to the football. And this is where I was going with my point. No, I wouldn't look good in a lot of them, Jim. They're not aimed at me. They're not aimed at you. They're aimed at a completely different market, and they might even get people who don't support Celtic to buy them. And that's what Adidas is doing with the jerseys, isn't it?
I think I need to plead the fifth on this one, as well as the friendlies.
You don't care enough,
how
do
they do
you?
the merchandise, I don't care. I mean, I get an email literally every single day. I get an email from Celtic FC, apart from the one that says you've got relocation to the South Stand. Do you like that arc? Who actually brought it all the way back to
I know.
the
Well
South
done.
Stand?
Well played.
So basically, yeah, if the kids like it and it's going to sell and make the club money, knock yourself out, on you go. But I mean, we've got jerseys after. I mean, people have a limited amount of money, and again, I'm going back to another arc. It's take. Nothing back. I mean, can you not give? Was there something in the group chat today, or was it X? I saw something. There was some club giving fans a free jersey or something.
I saw that.
For all the games. Who was that? Was that?
I can't remember what club it was actually, but I did see it. It was on.
Was it America?
It was on
America?
Mm-hmm.
X. Some club in America were giving out free jersey because you were at all the games this season. I don't know about home and away, but I'd like to see the club give something back, which they're not doing, which is disappointing. But no, I'll leave it like you, because you're now taking the mantle of that old guy. Yeah. I'll leave it jersey to the young team. Yeah.
I'll always love my jerseys, Jim, as you know, and my other interesting Celtic curio, like the head of Jim Farry that you now have at home, and at some point there will be a really dodgy handover of that head.
In actual fact, you can actually wear it. You can put not that I'm going to do that, but you can actually wear it.
That reminds me of U2 back in the 90s when I went to see them. They came on stage with the big heads. Anyway, we're going to wrap it up there, Jim, because I will be speaking to Tom Grant for tonight's edition of This Is Acsom. And I'm very, very keen to get to Tom now. So thanks, everybody, for sticking with us over the last week. Thanks to all the contributors, as I say. Have a great weekend. And if you're interested and you've got Celtic TV, tomorrow the game is live. I think 11 o'clock kickoff. So we'll be going live at 10:30 tomorrow. Join me and anybody else I can rope into that one, and we'll do the pre-match. All that's left for me to say once again, thanks again, Jim Orr, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.